Feathers in the freefall. Diplomat Julian Reed had experienced numerous first-contact scenarios in his 15 years with the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. He'd been threatened, worshipped, studied, and occasionally seduced, but never before had he been repeatedly tossed onto pillows. For the last time, Julian said, struggling to maintain his dignity while lying in a nest of impossibly soft cushions, this isn't standard human greeting protocol. The towering avian humanoid creature standing over him tilted her head, sending cascades of iridescent plumage rippling down her shoulders. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with a magnificent wingspan that could envelop him completely, Nyx was both terrifying and breathtaking. Your heart rate accelerates when you speak, she said, her voice musical despite the predatory gleam in her amber eyes. It indicates excitement or fear. In either case, cushioning is appropriate. Julian sighed, sinking deeper into the pillows that filled nearly half the chamber. The diplomatic mission to Airy Haven had been going smoothly until Nyx had been assigned as his cultural liaison. Since then, every time he opened his mouth, he found himself airborne moments later, followed by a soft landing and an alien body practically pouncing after him. Look, he began, immediately regretting it as Nyx's wings unfurled. You're speaking again, she noted, muscles tensing beneath her sapphire-hued feathers. Julian raised his hands in surrender. Wait. Please don't. Too late. With astonishing speed, Nyx swept forward, scooped him up as if he weighed nothing, and launched them both across the room. They landed in another pile of cushions with Nyx perched above him, her wings creating a canopy over their bodies. The cushioning was successful, she announced proudly, her face inches from his. Your fragile human body remains undamaged. Julian stared up at her, noticing how the light filtering through her feathers cast a blue glow across her face. Her features were sharp, almost avian, but with expressive eyes that held unmistakable intelligence and something else, humor. Are you? Julian narrowed his eyes. Are you enjoying this? Nyx's head tilted again, the feathered crest above her ears rising slightly. Enjoyment is irrelevant. I am protecting an honored guest. By throwing me around the room. By ensuring you land safely. She shifted her weight, still hovering above him. Your species is remarkably fragile. Without proper intervention, your own speech could harm you. Julian had spent enough time with alien cultures to recognize when he was being messed with. You're teasing me. A sound emerged from Nyx's throat, something between a chirp and a chuckle. Perhaps. Your reactions are fascinating. Before Julian could respond, the chamber doors swept open. Another of Nyx's species entered, this one with darker plumage and ceremonial markings across his chest. Elder Tarek, Nyx said, immediately rising and folding her wings against her back. The elder's eyes darted between them, his expression unreadable. The council has convened. They request the human's presence. Julian climbed to his feet, straightening his rumpled diplomatic uniform. I'd be honored to attend. Elder Tarek fixed his gaze on Julian. This is not an invitation, human. It is a summons. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Julian had been part of enough diplomatic missions to recognize when things were shifting from cultural exchange to something more serious. What's happened? He asked. Your vessel, Tarek said coldly. It transmitted unauthorized scans of our defensive arrays before entering our atmosphere. Julian's brow furrowed. That's impossible. We followed all established protocols. The evidence suggests otherwise. Tarek's wings rustled, a sign of agitation Julian had learned to recognize. The council will determine if this constitutes an act of espionage. After Tarek left, Julian turned to Nyx. I need to contact my ship. Communications have been restricted, she replied, her playfulness gone. Until the council's judgment, you are confined to the diplomatic quarter. This is ridiculous. We came in peace. Peace, Nyx said, moving closer, is a fragile thing. Much like humans. Julian paced the chamber, mind racing. Standard diplomatic procedure dictated caution when accused of espionage, but something felt wrong. The Horizon would never have conducted unauthorized scans, Captain Devanna was too experienced for such a rookie mistake. Someone's setting us up, he muttered. Speaking to yourself is still speaking, Nyx observed, wings twitching. Julian pointed at her. Don't you dare. A smile curved her beaked mouth. I wouldn't dream of it. Not when there are more pressing matters than cushioning you. Then help me. I need to prove our innocence. Nyx studied him, her head tilting in that curious, bird-like manner. Why should I believe you over my own elders? Because in 15 years of diplomatic service, I've never lied to a potential ally. Julian stepped closer to her. And because you've spent enough time throwing me around to know I'm telling the truth. She remained silent for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his. Finally, she nodded. The council chamber has blind spots in its security sensors. If you can access their evidence databases, you might find what you need. You'd help me break into your own security systems. I said you might find what you need. Her feathers rustled. I'm merely explaining architectural features. Julian smiled. Of course. The path to the council chamber wound through spiraling towers that seemed to be growing directly from the floating islands making up Airy Haven. Julian had never fully adjusted to the sensation of walking on land that hovered thousands of feet above the planet's surface, kept aloft by technology that blended seamlessly with the natural ecosystem. Nyx walked beside him, her powerful wings occasionally brushing against his arm. Guards flanked them, their own wings modified with metallic extensions that Julian suspected concealed weapons. Remember, Nyx whispered as they approached the massive doors of the council chamber, speak only when directly addressed. And try not to sound. Sound what? Human. The doors parted, revealing a circular room with 7 elder Aryans perched on curved platforms that rose from the central floor. The room's ceiling opened to the sky, allowing light to stream down and illuminate the proceedings. Julian Reed of Earth, intoned the central elder, a female with silver-streaked feathers. You stand accused of violating the terms of our first contact agreement. Julian stepped forward, conscious of Nyx tensing beside him. Honorable Council, I respectfully deny these accusations. The Horizon maintained passive sensors only, as agreed. Yet we detected active scans of our defense grid, countered another elder. Explain. I cannot explain what didn't happen, Julian replied carefully. I request to see the evidence. The elders exchanged glances. With a gesture from the central figure, a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed scanning patterns originating from the Horizon's position. Julian studied the display, frowning. This doesn't match our technology signature. These are pulse pattern scans. Earth vessels use continuous wave technology. Convenient explanation, said one of the male elders, Tarek. Perhaps you've developed new methods specifically to deceive us. Or perhaps, Julian suggested, someone else is trying to disrupt our peaceful exchange. A murmur ran through the council. The central elder leaned forward. You suggest sabotage. I suggest an investigation before jumping to conclusions that could damage our relationship. As Julian spoke, he noticed Nyx moving subtly toward one of the chamber's curved walls. Her wings spread slightly, obscuring her actions from most of the council members. The human makes a valid point, said a younger elder. Verification would be prudent. Verification requires time, Tarek countered. Meanwhile, their vessel remains in our airspace, potentially gathering more intelligence. Then quarantine the Horizon, Julian offered. But allow me to participate in the investigation. If someone is trying to frame us, both our peoples are at risk. The central elder studied him. A bold proposal, human. But how do we know we can trust you? Before Julian could answer, the chamber's lights flickered. The holographic display sputtered, then shifted, showing a different set of scanning patterns, ones originating not from the Horizon's position, but from within Airy Haven itself. All eyes turned to Nyx, who stood with her hand on a concealed panel in the wall. Counselors, she said, her voice strong despite the tension vibrating through her feathers, I believe we should consider the human's suggestion. Tarek rose, wings flaring. This is interference with council proceedings. This is revealing the complete evidence, Nyx countered. Something apparently overlooked in the initial presentation. The central elder's eyes narrowed. Explain yourself, Guardian Nyx. The security logs were filtered to show only external scans. I've merely removed the filter to display all scanning activities during the time frame in question. Julian stepped closer to the display. These internal scans match the signature you accused us of using. Someone inside Airy Haven is trying to frame my ship. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Elders spoke over one another, guards shifted positions, and Tarek's feathers bristled with barely contained rage. Through it all, Julian felt Nyx move to his side. "Prepare yourself," she whispered. "For what?" Her wings tensed. "For takeoff." Before Julian could protest, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The holographic display shifted again, showing multiple vessels approaching Airy Haven at high speed. "We're under attack," shouted one of the guards. In the confusion that followed, Julian felt strong arms wrap around him. Nyx's wings snapped open, and with a powerful leap, she launched them both upward through the open ceiling. "What are you doing?" Julian shouted over the rush of wind. "Saving your fragile human body," Nyx called back, banking sharply to avoid a patrol skiff. "And possibly all of Airy Haven." As they soared between the floating islands, Julian caught glimpses of attack vessels, sleek, predatory craft that matched neither Earth nor Aryan design. "Who are they?" he demanded. "The real spies," Nyx replied grimly. "And they've just shown their hand." They landed on a small, secluded island dominated by a structure that resembled a nest more than a building. Nyx set Julian down gently, a stark contrast to her usual pillow-tossing antics. "We need to contact your ship," she said, moving quickly to a communication panel concealed within the wall. "They're in danger." Julian watched her, a realization dawning. "You knew. You knew something was wrong even before the council meeting." Nyx's amber eyes met his. "I suspected. There have been anomalies in our security network for weeks. When your ship arrived and was immediately accused, the pattern became clear. Why help me? You risked everything back there." Her wings folded tighter against her back, a gesture Julian had come to recognize as discomfort. "Because," she said softly, "when I carried you the first time, your heart beat in perfect rhythm with mine. Among my people, that is significant." Julian stared at her, understanding slowly dawning. The pillow tosses, the pouncing, the constant physical contact, they weren't just teasing or protective instincts. "Nyx," he began. She raised a hand to stop him. "First, we save our peoples. Then we can discuss why I keep throwing you onto pillows." As sirens wailed across Airy Haven and distant explosions lit up the sky, Julian couldn't help but smile. Somehow, in the midst of a diplomatic crisis turned potential war, he'd found an unexpected connection with this fierce, feathered guardian. And he was fairly certain there would be many more pillow tosses in their future, assuming they survived the next few hours. Gravity of emotions. The communication array hummed to life under Nyx's skilled touch. Julian watched as her taloned fingers danced across the control panel with surprising delicacy. "Can you reach my ship?" he asked, peering over her shoulder. "If your Captain Divana hasn't moved position," Nyx replied, adjusting frequencies. "The attacking vessels are creating significant interference." From their secluded sanctuary, Julian could see multiple explosions blooming across Airy Haven's floating archipelago. The once peaceful cluster of islands now resembled a war zone, with defense skiffs racing to intercept the mysterious attackers. "There," Nyx said triumphantly as the screen flickered to life. Captain Divana's face appeared, her usual composed expression replaced by one of grim determination. Smoke clouded the background behind her. "Read. Thank the stars. We thought you'd been captured." "Not exactly," Julian replied. "The horizon is under attack." "Affirmative. 2 vessels appeared on our flank, claiming to be Aryan security forces. When we refused to power down, they opened fire." She glanced off-screen, barking orders to someone before continuing. "Our defensive capabilities are limited against multiple attackers." "They're not Aryan," Julian said firmly. "They're imposters trying to sabotage our diplomatic mission." Nyx leaned into view. "Captain, this is Guardian Nyx of the Aryan Defense Corps. Your diplomat speaks truth. These attackers have infiltrated our security network and are trying to start a war between our peoples." Divana's eyes narrowed, assessing the winged alien. "Can you provide any identification of these vessels?" "Not yet," Nyx admitted. "But their weapon signatures don't match any known Aryan technology." A thunderous explosion rocked their sanctuary, causing dust to rain down from the ceiling. Nyx instinctively spread her wings, shielding Julian from the falling debris. "We need to move," she said urgently. They've tracked our transmission. Divana's image flickered. Reed, we'll try to hold position, but we're taking heavy damage. If you can clear our name with the Aryan Council. The transmission died as another blast hit closer to their position. Nyx grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him toward a concealed doorway at the back of the room. Emergency escape tunnel, she explained, pushing him through. It leads to the underside of the island. The underside? Julian echoed, his voice rising. What exactly am I supposed to do down there? Nyx's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light. Fall. And trust me to catch you. Before Julian could protest, the floor beneath them opened. He plummeted into open air, the wind rushing past his ears as he fell away from the floating island. Panic surged through him until strong arms wrapped around his waist and powerful wings snapped open above him. I really wish you'd warned me before doing that, he shouted over the wind. Nyx's laughter vibrated against his back. Where's the fun in that? They swooped between the floating islands, Nyx's wings carrying them through narrow passages and cloud banks that provided cover from the attackers above. Julian could see the battle more clearly now. Sleek black vessels with crimson markings were engaged with both Aryan defense skiffs and, in the distance, the Horizon, which was returning fire while trying to maintain altitude. We need to get back to the Council, Julian said. They need to know what's happening. The Council chamber will be the first place the infiltrators look for us, Nyx countered. We need allies before we can approach the Elders safely. She banked sharply, diving toward a smaller island partially concealed by atmospheric mist. Unlike the grand structures of the main archipelago, this island featured a simple, dome-shaped building with few windows. My squadron's outpost, Nyx explained as they landed on a narrow platform. If anyone will listen without question, it's them. The door slid open before they reached it, revealing a muscular Aryan male with bronze feathers and a stern expression. Commander Nyx, he said, eyes darting to Julian. I see you brought the cause of our troubles. The human isn't responsible, Jarvik, Nyx replied, folding her wings. We've been infiltrated. Jarvik stepped aside to let them enter, though his suspicious gaze never left Julian. Inside, a half-dozen Aryans in combat gear were gathered around a tactical display showing the ongoing battle. Status report, Nyx demanded, assuming an authoritative tone that Julian hadn't heard from her before. A female with silver-streaked feathers looked up. 3 enemy vessels confirmed. They're using modified Aryan transponder codes, but their flight patterns are all wrong, too rigid, too mechanical. Any identification? Nothing concrete, but analysis suggests Valkyrie technology. Julian stepped forward. Valkyrie? I thought they were extinct. All eyes turned to him. Jarvik's feathers bristled. What would a human know of the Valkyrie? Earth's xenohistorians have studied the ancient records, Julian explained. The Valkyrie disappeared from this sector centuries ago after draining multiple star systems of resources. Nyx nodded. We thought them gone as well. But if they've returned, then both our peoples are in danger, Julian finished. The tactical display flickered, showing new movement patterns. The enemy vessels were converging on the horizon, which was now trailing smoke from one engine. Your ship won't last much longer, Jarvik observed coldly. Julian turned to Nyx. We need to get the Council to authorize a joint defense. If Earth and Airy Haven appear divided, we're exactly what the Valkyrie want, easy targets fighting each other instead of the real threat. Nyx studied the display, her expression hardening with each passing second. Finally, she looked up at her squadron. Talaris, Vidra, prepare for combat launch. Jarvik, secure our communications. The rest of you, defensive positions. She turned to Julian. And you, diplomat, are coming with me. Where? A familiar gleam entered her eyes. Back to the pillows, actually. Before Julian could question her meaning, alarms blared throughout the outpost. The tactical display shifted to show enemy vessels approaching their position. They found us, Jarvik growled. How? It doesn't matter, Nyx said, drawing a sleek weapon from her belt. Defensive protocol. Now. The squadron moved with practiced efficiency, taking positions and readying weapons. Nyx grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him toward a back corridor. My private quarters, she explained as they ran. There's something you need to see before we make our next move. Her quarters were Spartan, with one notable exception, an elaborate nest of cushions that dominated the center of the room. Julian raised an eyebrow. So the pillow obsession is personal, not cultural. Focus, human, Nyx chided, though he caught the faint darkening of her facial feathers that indicated embarrassment. She moved to a wall panel, pressing her palm against it until a hidden compartment slid open. From it, she withdrew a crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. This is an ancestral memory crystal, she explained. It contains records dating back to the first Valkyrie incursion, including their weaknesses. Julian stared at the crystal. Why keep this hidden? Shouldn't the council have access to such important information? Nyx's wings twitched, a sign of discomfort he'd come to recognize. The crystal is bound to my bloodline. My ancestor was the one who drove the Valkyrie from our system. The council, they fear the power this knowledge represents. They don't trust you. They trust me to guard, not to lead. Her amber eyes met his. Just as your superiors trust you to speak, not to act. Understanding dawned on Julian. You've been waiting for this. You knew they'd return. I hoped they wouldn't, she corrected. But I prepared anyway. An explosion rocked the outpost, much closer than before. Dust rained from the ceiling as the lights flickered. Nyx pressed the crystal into Julian's hands. If anything happens to me, get this to your ship. Your scientists might be able to extract the tactical data. Julian closed his fingers around the cool crystal. Nothing's going to happen to you. Her beak-like mouth curved into a wry smile. Your confidence is admirable but misplaced. The Valkyrie are. The door to her quarters exploded inward, sending them both diving for cover. Through the smoke, Julian glimpsed tall, armored figures with glowing red visors. Valkyrie boarding party, Nyx hissed, pulling him behind the nest of cushions. Stay down. She rose just enough to fire her weapon, sending bolts of energy through the smoke. Return fire scorched the wall behind them, igniting several cushions. Julian clutched the crystal, mind racing. The diplomatic approach had failed spectacularly, but perhaps there was still a way to salvage the mission, and more importantly, their lives. Nyx, he whispered urgently. The Valkyrie, do they communicate on standard frequencies? She ducked as another energy bolt sizzled overhead. Yes, but encrypted. Why? Julian pulled a small device from his pocket, his diplomatic translator. Earth technology specializes in communication. If I can access their frequency, maybe we can listen in on their plans. Nyx fired again, then glanced at his device. Worth trying. Cover the right flank, there's a weapon in the compartment behind you. Julian reached back, finding a sleek pistol unlike any he'd seen before. It fit his hand surprisingly well, though its weight suggested powerful engineering. Point and think, Nyx explained tersely. It's partially telepathic. You're giving me an advanced weapon. Her eyes glinted. I'm giving you a chance to prove humans aren't as fragile as I've been treating you. Julian nodded, oddly touched by her trust. He adjusted his translator, scanning for unusual frequencies while Nyx continued to exchange fire with the Valkyrie in the corridor. There, he said after a tense minute. I'm picking up something. Harsh, guttural sounds emerged from the translator, gradually resolving into recognizable words. Primary target acquired. Proceed with extraction of the crystal and elimination of all witnesses. The Prophet demands total information control. Nyx and Julian exchanged glances. Prophet? Julian questioned. A title I don't recognize, Nyx replied. But they're after the crystal, which means they know what it contains. Another barrage of fire forced them lower. The room was filling with smoke, making it difficult to breathe. We can't stay here, Nyx said grimly. They'll overrun our position in minutes. Julian looked around desperately, then his gaze fixed on the large window behind them. How far down is the next island? Nyx followed his gaze. About 500 meters. Why? Because, Julian said, tightening his grip on both the crystal and the weapon, I think it's time I learned to fly. Before Nyx could respond, Julian rose and fired repeatedly at the Valkyrie, forcing them back momentarily. Then, grabbing Nyx's hand, he pulled her toward the window. Julian, what are you? Trust me, he said, meeting her amber eyes. Like I've trusted you. For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in mutual understanding. Then, as the Valkyrie renewed their assault, Julian pulled Nyx through the window and into open air. They plummeted together, the wind tearing at their clothes and feathers. Julian clutched the crystal to his chest with one hand, the other still gripping Nyx's. "Spread your wings," he shouted over the roar of their descent. "Not yet," she called back. "They'll shoot us down if we slow too soon." They fell past the edge of the island, clouds whipping around them. Julian caught glimpses of the battle still raging above, the horizon maneuvering desperately, Aryan skiffs engaging the Valkyrie vessels, explosions illuminating the darkening sky. When they'd fallen far enough that the outpost was barely visible, Nyx squeezed his hand. Now. Her wings snapped open with enough force that Julian feared they might dislocate. Their descent slowed jarringly, and Julian found himself swung up into Nyx's arms, cradled against her chest as she navigated the air currents with expert precision. "That," she said, her voice breathless but tinged with admiration, "was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen a wingless being do." Julian smiled up at her, adrenaline still coursing through his system. "Maybe a bit of both." As they soared toward the lower islands, Julian activated his translator again, searching for council frequencies. "We need to warn them," he explained. "The Valkyrie aren't just after us, they want to eliminate all knowledge of how they were defeated before." Nyx nodded, adjusting her flight path to avoid a patch of turbulence. "If we can reach Elder Serena directly, she might listen. She was my mentor before I joined the Guard." "The silver-feathered one in the center?" "Yes." "She's skeptical but fair." Julian found the frequency and began transmitting. "Elder Council, this is Julian Reed of Earth. We have critical information about the attackers. They are Valkyrie, returned after centuries, and they've infiltrated your security systems. This is not an Earth attack, it's an attempt to pit our peoples against each other." Static answered him. Julian tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please respond. Lives are at stake. Both human and Aryan." More static, then finally, a voice cut through. "Human diplomat, this is Elder Serena. Your claims are disturbing. Do you have proof?" Julian held up the crystal, though he knew she couldn't see it. "Guardian Nyx possesses an ancestral memory crystal with tactical data on the Valkyrie. They're specifically targeting this knowledge." A pause, then, "Where is Guardian Nyx?" "Currently saving my life," Julian replied honestly. "We're headed for the lower archipelago after escaping a Valkyrie boarding party." Another voice cut in, "Elder Tarek. Convenient story. More likely the human has taken Nyx hostage too." "I am no one's hostage, Elder Tarek," Nyx interrupted, her voice sharp even over the communication channel. "The human speaks truth. The Valkyrie have returned, and they've compromised our security through agents who've infiltrated our ranks." "Agents?" Serena's voice sharpened. "You accuse your own people of treason." "I accuse whoever is responsible," Nyx replied. "The evidence is clear in the security logs, if you look at all of them, not just the selectively filtered ones presented earlier." The channel fell silent for several long moments. Julian and Nyx exchanged worried glances as they continued their flight toward the lower islands. Finally, Serena spoke again. "Come to the Auxiliary Council chamber on Isla Marin. Bring your evidence, both of you. And Guardian Nyx, be cautious about whom you trust." The transmission ended. Nyx adjusted their course, banking toward a smaller cluster of islands barely visible through the clouds below. "That went better than expected," Julian observed. Nyx's expression remained grave. "Perhaps. Or we're flying into another trap." Julian looked up at her face, studying the fierce determination in her eyes, the proud set of her jaw, the subtle patterns in her facial feathers that he'd begun to find inexplicably beautiful. "Either way," he said softly, "I'm glad I'm with you." Her arms tightened around him momentarily, and the rhythm of her wing beats faltered for just an instant, enough to tell him his words had affected her. "You're surprisingly resilient for a creature without wings," she murmured, her voice warmer than he'd ever heard it. Julian smiled. "And you're surprisingly gentle for someone who keeps throwing me onto pillows." As they descended toward Isla Marin, the battle still raging in the skies above them, Julian realized something had fundamentally changed between them. What had begun as an awkward diplomatic assignment had evolved into something far more complex, and infinitely more precious. The crystal in his hand pulsed softly, as if responding to his thoughts. Whatever secrets it contained, whatever dangers the Valkyrie represented, Julian knew one thing with certainty: he and Nyx would face them together. And somehow, that knowledge made the impending confrontation feel less like a desperate last stand and more like the beginning of something extraordinary.